Good morning, ladies, and welcome to Chapter 28, Human Systems and Homeostasis. As you can see, chapters 29 through 34 to follow. As I mentioned yesterday, I said six, but there are actually 7 chapters in your textbook that deal with human systems in human anatomy and physiology. And so we're going to try and condense these into just a few weeks of study. So before we get to Easter break, we're going to deal with most of chapter 28. And the beginning of chapter 28 is just kind of an overview of the systems. And we're going to be concentrating mostly on that first section. And then the rest of it goes into more depth on some of the systems. And the other chapters also go into more depth on the systems. And so we'll kind of, based on your answers or incorrect answers from the pretest yesterday and Wednesday, I will be culling that information. I've run the Scantrons, but I haven't had a chance to sit down with them and take a look at what exactly needs to be addressed over the next few weeks, but by after Easter, I'll have that answered. As we do go through the systems, especially the beginning of next week, I want you to be thinking of questions you have about the systems or things about the systems you want to learn about. I will be asking you to write those down and give those to me, so once again, I can add that to my repertoire of what we're going to be covering. All right, so let's start off today with just a little bit of vocabulary. Since we're talking human anatomy and physiology, what the heck do those terms mean? Anatomy is the study of the structure of the body. So we're studying what parts are in the system and where those parts are at. Physiology is the study of how those parts work, the function of the parts, the function of the system. Way back at the beginning of the year, we made a list of our themes for the year, and one of our themes for the year was that structure follows function, or function follows structure, whichever, that they're tightly related to one another. So next week when we start to look at the systems, we'll take a look at general anatomy, what organs are part of that system, and then what's the overall function of that system. And then after Easter, when we start looking at the systems in more detail, we'll get more detailed. All right, so my next question for you is, what requirements do you have for being alive? Now we are concentrating right now on humans, but since we're animals, we can say these are requirements for all animal life. So if you think about it for a minute, things that you require, that you need to stay alive, probably some of the things that first come to mind are things like water. You need food, you need nutrients, right? And you need oxygen. That's a very important one as well. So those 3 are probably the 3 that most prevalently come to mind. A lot of times, students will also come back with the answer of shelter. And in a way, this is true because one of our requirements for animal life is maintaining an appropriate body temperature. So I put it out there to you. Are we ectotherms or endotherms? We, of course, are endotherms, which means that we have to maintain our own body temperature. And so when we're in situations where the climate or the environment around us, like for instance today, if you are watching this on April 12th, 2019, today it is rather blustery outside. And so if you go outside without a coat on, okay, and so you're going to want to go inside. So that would be seeking shelter to maintain your appropriate body temperature. But if you decide to stay outside for a while, after a while, what will happen? A couple of things will happen. All the blood flow is going to be concentrated towards the center of your body, towards the internal organs, okay, and away from the surface of your skin. Because if you lose a finger, yeah, you're probably going to miss your finger, but it's not as big of a deal as if you lose your liver, for instance. Okay? That's a big deal. You're not going to survive that. You might also start to shiver. So those are ways that we help maintain an appropriate body temperature. If you come back inside and you're in one of the rooms, like my room today, I think is awfully warm, and you're getting too hot, so your environment is too warm for you, you do things like starting to sweat. So these are all ways that we maintain our appropriate body temperature because we are endotherms. So the concept of homeostasis is a prevalent one as well, and we define this in the last chapter when we were talking about behaviors and how behaviors, when we do different behaviors, it's to help maintain homeostasis. So remember that the definition of homeostasis is the maintenance of balance in the body. Remember, this is an active process. We're maintaining balance. So our bodies have to do things to help maintain that balance. If you go back up and look at the requirements for animal life, we just talked about how we maintain balance with the appropriate body temperature. As far as nutrients are concerned, we get hungry. If we need nutrients, we get hungry. We'll talk about some fun stuff with that when we get to talking about the digestive system a little bit more. When we need water, we get thirsty. When the oxygen levels in our blood are off, that causes our breathing rate to change and the depth of our breathing to change. So there are two basic ways that homeostasis is maintained in a body. Okay, so these two control systems, or these two control mechanisms. One way is through positive feedback. And positive feedback is the less common of the two types of controls. And in positive feedback, what's happening is you have a stimulus that causes a response, and that response enhances the stimulus, which in turn enhances the response, which enhances the stimulus. And so this continues, this keeps going. Let's take a look at this on a little diagram here. All right, so we have a stimulus. Oops, just have to scroll down a little bit there, sorry. That causes a response, and the response enhances the stimulus, which then enhances the response, which enhances the stimulus. And this keeps going until some outside force stops it. Okay. Shuts off that response. So then there is no more enhancement of the stimulus. So a couple of examples of this, if we look out in the world outside of our bodies, an example of this would be feedback in a microphone. So you speak into a microphone, that's the stimulus. And the sound comes out of the speakers. That's the basic idea. Yay. Okay. So the sound comes out of the speakers. And what happens is if the volume's up too high, which is why I don't have the volume on my computer right now, okay? If the volume's up too high, that sound goes back into the microphone. And then the microphone amplifies it and it comes back out of the speakers. That's going to make a louder sound, and that sound's going to go back into the microphone. And you get that squealy noise because it's this continuous more sound going in and coming out. And so if we want to stop that response, we need to pull the microphone away from our mouth. Move the microphone away from our mouth. And then that stops it. Now, like I said, in bodies, this does not happen a whole lot, but one really great example of this is in childbirth. Okay, so there is a hormone. You produce this hormone that causes contractions of the uterus. You've got to get that baby out of there. Okay, the hormone causes contractions. So the hormone causes contractions. And those contractions increase the production of the hormone, which causes the contractions to get harder, which causes more hormone to be produced, which causes more contractions, harder contractions. So this is why they get worse as it goes on, which causes more hormone to be produced. And eventually, the baby's out. Goodness, I'm not doing well with this today, am I? So eventually the baby's born. That stops the hormone from being produced. Because the hormone's in your blood, there are still contractions for a little while, but that's okay because as we'll see when we get to this right before finals, we need those contractions to get the placenta out. So those are all positive feedback mechanisms. The other control system, or other control mechanism, is negative feedback. And I put this one in purple because this one is the most common. This is the one we see the most. In a negative feedback mechanism, the stimulus causes the response, but the response decreases the stimulus. So it shuts off that stimulus, so we shut off the response. Okay, so we begin as we did before, with a stimulus causing the response, but the response shuts off the stimulus. Turns it down so there's no longer a response required. So in the outside world, so outside of the body, a great example of this would be your thermostat in your house. So like right now in my room, like I said, it's a blustery day outside and I heard my fan just kick on. So when the temperature in my room gets too low, so right now it's set for 68 degrees. So below 68 degrees, that's about what my room is usually at. When it gets below 68 degrees, the heat pump kicks on. The heat pump coming on is going to cause the temperature to go up. And once it reaches 68 degrees, that shuts the system down. The heat pump turns off, and we're done until the temp goes down again. Like I said, this is most common in the body, and we can take a look at, we talked a little bit about calcium levels when we were talking about behaviors and how your internal environment regulates itself. So if we talked about binging on ice cream, okay? So let's say you've been doing that again, and so your blood calcium is really high. So your blood calcium is really high. This causes you to produce a hormone, and we'll talk about specifically what that hormone is later on. Okay? So this causes you to produce a hormone that puts, the hormone does is it puts calcium on the bones. It takes it out of the blood and puts calcium on the bones. And so once again then, that's going to lower in turn, that will cause our blood calcium to go down. And then we no longer produce the hormone. So fun stuff. This is a very, like I said, this is a very popular one in our bodies to help maintain homeostasis. Now, one thing I want to caution you about, a lot of times when people look at the positive and negative feedback, they're like, oh, positive feedback is a good thing, negative feedback's a bad thing. It has nothing to do with judgment of the feedback systems. Okay? They're both doing their job, and they're doing their job well. So they're both very positive things because they are helping, and we're going to judge them, they're helping our bodies to maintain homeostasis. All right, so that's it for today, just a little intro, and then starting on Monday, we'll go back and review the structural organization of living things. I did notice that on the pretest, that of the 52 people who took the pretest, I think only like maybe 4 missed that question about the structural organization of living things. So we'll go over that on Monday, and then we'll talk about the different kinds of tissues, and we'll start our litany of systems. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a great day.